Hello, and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. My guest today is one of the biggest talkers I know. In fact, she and I met when we were both speaking in front of, I think, 2,500 people at one of the Art of Leadership for Women events in Canada. Our Tiffani Bova is the Chief Growth Evangelist at Salesforce, and she's the author of Tiffani Bova is the Chief Growth Evangelist at Salesforce and the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Growth IQ. She has been named to the latest Thinkers 50 list of the world's top management thinkers and is a welcome guest on Bloomberg, BNN, Cheddar, MSNBC, and Yahoo Finance, among others. She also contributes her thinking to publications including Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Diginomica, Quora, Thrive, Rotman School of Management, and Duke Dialogue Review. She's a change maker. She's an incredible thought leader. She is forward thinking, and her insights are highly sought, keynote after keynote after keynote. In fact, she has been one of my inspirations to get better at the game of keynoting. So I am thrilled to have her here. We're going to talk about her time on the front lines of sales, marketing, innovation. She is just so forthright, so candid, and such an uber professional that I'm fascinated to have this conversation about Wonderhell, about the Wonderhell she's seen in the companies that she helps to think about how they're going to grow, and also how she thinks about it in terms of herself. So with all that being said, Tiffani, welcome. Let's have some big talk.
I want to bottle that up and send it to my mom. She thinks I fix printers. That's what she thinks I do for a living, I think. I don't know.
You know, given the fact that every time my dad's computer breaks, he calls me, it's possible that he thinks I do the same thing.
Exactly. But that's okay. You know, they love us anyway.
They love us anyway. So you have written this incredible book. It is 300 pages, jam-packed with so much insight, such deep thinking. You and I spoke at that conference together in California, and they gave all of us, each other's books, and we were all signing books for each other. And I started reading it on the plane, and I was so exhausted from leaving it all on the stage that I picked up the book. I started reading the first 5 pages, and I was like, oh my God, I need notes. I need highlighters. I need Post-its. I need a notebook to capture all of this brilliance. And how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, that is a interesting question. If you talk about from the moment I sat down in front of a keyboard and watched that little flashing icon.
Oh yeah, blink, 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 blink. What you got for me, Tiffani?
What you got for me? Exactly. That was 6 months. Mm-hmm. But the sort of decision to write the book and then to figure out what do I want to write and how do I want to write it, that was obviously a much longer process. But what I did in sort of doing the whole preparation for the book was I read 75 or so of the best quote unquote business books kind of ever written. And I took notes I didn't read them cover to cover because many I had already read, but I took notes on what I really liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, how it made me feel when I was reading the book. And so I spent a lot of time on the way people would feel when they read my book. And so, it's 30 short stories because I have short attention span instead of one big long 300-page sort of research throw up of, everything I wanted to say. So I did 30 short stories. Then to your whole point of I need, a highlighter and notes, I underlined the things that I wanted people to sort of grab on the page because in case they didn't read the whole thing. And then I'm a visual learner. So I did sort of sketch notes to try to tell the story in a visual way because some people, that's how they learn. So, I really actually spent much more time on the sort of orchestration and sort of feel of the book as I did in writing it. So, it was a fun experience. I don't know if I'd do it again. It's sort of now is the question, would I do it again? I don't know. See,
I love that you spent that time doing that. I love that every page has, things underlined, things in bold, things in italics. You have, drawings all over the place for it. And it just makes it so real. Every type of learner can come to this book and take something away from it, which is no small task. I mean, that's a tough thing to do. And I love when you said that you read 75 books, I was thinking, no, that can't be right, because you and I have read those business books where people read other people's books and then they regurgitate their ideas, and it's like they do book reports. on people's ideas, but
Right.
that wasn't why you read the books. I mean, you read them for some of the ideas, but you've also walked this path. You've done the work. So you're writing about your experience and your interpretation of what you're seeing out there in the business world, but you read the books to study the game of writing books. That's
why,
interesting.
Yes, that's why I did that. And I think that had a lot to do with how I would prepare for keynotes, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But, on the books themselves, I was very clear in the beginning of the book that this was not some net new, sort of strategic position on how to grow your business. Also, in reading those books, it was to pay homage to those previous strategies for the past 50 or 60 years. But I modernized them all with what we now have at our disposal, which is social, mobile, cloud. When Good to Great was written or Crossing the Chasm was written, like a lot of these things were written. We didn't have a whole lot, In Search of Excellence, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Like you could rattle them all off, right? But back then we didn't have the platforms we have today. And so that really sort of changed how to apply those growth models that businesses were using. And so that's what I tried to do, right? Tell a story and use a format that people would find inviting and not off-putting for those that read and learn differently, but then also to not try to reinvent the wheel, which I did not claim I did.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of ideas here that are new because the way that you apply them to the world that we have today. I mean, I'm not sure if there's any like brand new ideas. There's just brand new understandings of those ideas. Albert Einstein said that all wisdom is experience, all knowledge is experience. And I think that's true, right? You don't really know something until you've experienced it. But I think if all knowledge is experience, I would say that all wisdom is framework. Because you could come at somebody with a wall of smarts and be like, here are all the things to do. And they're like, great, you're really right. But unless you give them the framework where they could apply to their own problems, then they can't go, you're really right. And now I understand how to fix my own problem. And I think that's what you did in this book so brilliantly, is that you gave a framework which helps anybody wherever they are approach their problem and be able to figure it out. And you give 10 different ways to do it, 10 different. So I think that's incredible. So, and I love what you said about how long it took you. People ask me how long it took me to write Limitless. And I say, it took me 6 weeks. And they're like, 6 weeks? Oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, but it took me 25 years and 6 weeks to come up with it.
Right.
So fast writing, slow thinking. So the next book that I'm writing is about this idea of wonder hell. And wonder hell is that moment where you're like, oh my God, this is working. Somebody's actually paying attention to this book I wrote, or this product I built, or this company that I started, or this thing that I want to do. I can't believe it. It's amazing. It's awesome. It's wild. It's wonderful. And also, I've never been so exhausted in my entire life. I'm so stressed out. I'm so exhausted. I'm so full of anxiety, doubt, insecurity, imposter syndrome. I don't really know. It's hell. It's wonderful. And it's hell. It's wonder hell. And I think wonder hell is the moment where your burden of potential is that blinking cursor. And it's like, hey, Tiffani, what you got for me? Are you going to live into this newfound you that you now have just barely glanced, but you can't unsee? Or are you going to let her pass you by? And I think every business book I've read, and maybe you've found some others, but everyone I've read and every self-help book I've read has said, you just need to survive it. Right? Like self-help, bubble baths, meditate, just get through it, hustle, grind, whatever you need, because it's going to be fine after. But I think on the other side of wonder hell is the next wonder hell and the next wonder hell and the next wonder hell, because you're constantly figuring out what you're made of. And so I'm interested, did you feel that? I mean, this book has come out, it's been a perennial bestseller. It's always one of the top business books sold. Were you expecting this, or were there moments where you were caught off guard and had to sort of calculate where you were going and what this could be?
I had, it was terrifying, inspiring, satisfying, mortifying.
Yes, all the feels.
All at the same time. And I can tell you that when I finished writing it, and then my editors, I published with Portfolio, they had come back, and now we were ready for kind of the endorsements, right? To go out to, people who would read it and sort of tell you the truth.
Yes.
And really early on in this journey of me writing a book, I was speaking at an event with Seth Godin, and Seth and I have known each other for 20 years or so, known each other for a long time. And we were back in the green room, and he was really the catalyst for me to actually say, okay, I guess now I have to write a book. Because I was on stage that day with Brene Brown, Seth Godin, Chelsea Clinton, and Malala.
Lightweights.
Lightweights, right? And all of them had a book. And so, when I was done, people were like, well, where's your book? And so Seth and I were backstage, and he put his hand on my arm and he said, look, you do an amazing job, and people, where you work are good. You are great. You have got to get your words on paper. And when Seth Godin, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's sort of the marketing whisperer. He's sort of done so many amazing things, but also just a huge giver and just a kind soul. And so I was like, if Seth Godin tells you this, it's kind of like, first it was a whisper, you should write a book. Then it was sort of like, a book upside the head, you should write a book. And then it's sort of like, a house drops on your head, you should write the book. And then Seth Godin says you should write the book. You go, I think I should write the book. So Seth was the first person I sent the book to read it. Yes. And I said to him, hey, listen, would you do this? And he said, look, I'll read it, but I'm going to be painfully honest. So if it's terrible, I will tell you, and I won't endorse the book. And I'm like, okay. So he was the first person that I sent it to. The baby.
And what happened? What happened?
Right? Is the baby ugly? Is the baby not ugly? Right?
Oh my gosh.
And so, that 24 hours, it was like, and I didn't know when I would get it back. And sure enough, the cover quote of the book, is Seth Godin. And right.
Which I just want to read real quick. A worthy successor to Michael Porter Bova's book is that rare gift. It opens doors for new ideas and new actions. No glib answers here. Simply hard-won wisdom that will provoke big changes for organizations large and small. Now, I have become a little bit of a student of the whole book blurb thing. And here's what I've noticed. Seth does blurb a lot of books, but he will blurb things and he'll say something like, growth is important for a company to understand. Tiffani Bova wrote a book about it. Or he will say, this is a gift, right? Like there are two very different ways that he blurbs books. This is a quote. Did he just send it back to you and say, great? Or did he give you feedback? Was there any suggestions along the way? Like, how did that happen?
His email back was, well, first of all, I set a little VIP alert, right? If Seth Godin emails me back, ding, right? Like I'm waiting. And I sent it, probably like 8 o'clock in the morning on like a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And, 10 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, it was in my inbox back. And I sort of stared at the message before I clicked on it. And I was just like, okay.
It's like when the school picture comes back and you're just like, I don't even know if I want to open it. Just like when the headshot, like the lady sent you your headshots and you're like, I don't want to, I gotta.
So I clicked on it. Right. And it was just like, amazing. You nailed it. I had no doubt. And then that was the blurb. Right.
Wow.
And so, that was a huge weight off of my shoulders because he would have told me, look, yes. I think you need to, because why wouldn't he have? And so then I started to send it out, to other people. I think that relieved a lot of pressure for me. But now it was like, okay, now it has to publish, right? And then people have to buy it. And will I make a bestseller list? Will anybody want it? Will it get translated? Or was this just, now I have the vanity book, and I could say, I have a book too, when I'm on stage with, so, right? Laura and everybody else that, you guys all had a book. I wouldn't have had one. Everybody, when we met, you said everyone was signing books. Everyone had a book. There was 12 years I didn't have one.
Well, that's the entire reason I wrote one, because I did this TEDx. I got asked to speak. Somebody paid me $1,500 and flew me to Idaho and gave me a hat with the potato on it and was like, here you go. And I was like, that's amazing. This is a job. I like this job.
Right.
And then I started getting offers for more and more and more. And when I was starting to get offers for like 5 figures and, I was looking around and I'm like, everybody else on the stage has a book. I should get me one of them.
Right.
So that's why I wrote mine. It was sort of the same thing. I was like, I know that I'm legit, but I'm not legit, right? Like I gotta do this. And for some people, the book is a thing. You either have it or you don't. And you have to do it. So was the moment when Seth sent you back that quote, the moment where you were like, I think this is going to be a thing? Or was there a point? Because I know in writing Limitless and even working on Wonder Hell now, there's like that moment where you're like, I think this might be a thing. This could be bigger than just, I just need to have a book.
It was, I had something to say. And so I've been told I'm a masterful storyteller on stage. Like,
yes.
that tends to be my superpower.
Yes, I can confirm.
Could I translate that though to writing? Because my personality and the way I tell stories is so specific. And so I had to also be careful that I didn't write a book that didn't sound like me, because, like we, normally are traveling, in 2019, I flew 375,000 miles. I was on, gave 100 keynotes on 6 continents, 2020, different story, but multiply that across 10 or 12 years. I've given a lot of keynotes. So you have a lot of people who have seen me, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. So if I wrote a book that sounded like it wasn't me, they would have called BS, right? Yeah. And I couldn't have someone write it for me. They would have called BS. So I had to figure out, how do I take my stage storytelling talent and translate that to writing? And it was a really difficult process for me to actually make that, where you said you wrote it in 6 weeks and you could write it really quickly. There are so many people I know that I envy, like you, that can just do that. That was not how I got that book on paper. I actually gave 10 keynotes. And I wrote each chapter like it was a keynote. And I stood up and I recorded myself and I recorded my voice. I transcribed everything I said. So with each keynote, I had thousands of words and 10 or 15 pages of content. And then I wrote the chapter. So all the little isms and stories were actually part of my keynote, because I don't write that way, because I was trained to write as an analyst. I used to work at Gartner, and that's a very different style of writing. And so it's not the way I speak. So, I would say to anybody listening, right, that if you're really interested in writing a book, is know what your voice is, know what your personality is, and then how do you translate that onto paper? That's how I did it, because I'm a visual listen learner, not a writing read learner. So that's the way I had to transcribe my story.
That's fascinating, because I was trained as a political speech writer. So it does make sense, right? That's like, I write in the same way that I speak. My book's also not as research-based as yours. I was joking around when we had, my publicist was shopping around for media that was going to cover it. One of the major women's magazines called my book a little thin. She's like, I'm really sorry they called it a little thin. And I was like, hey, it's the first time a women's magazine's ever called me thin. Woo!
They're talking about you, right?
They're talking about me. They used my name and thin in the same sentence. 1982 me would have been really happy about that. So okay. So you have something to say. It's you're getting response on the keynote stage, so it's out there. But then you have to publish it, and then it's like, will anybody buy it? Right? We know the average book sells like 250 copies, maybe, right? That's kind of terrifying. That's not going to work for the publisher and the advance and the people who are expecting big things, and all the people that you interviewed for the book, and all the ones who are out there helping you put the book out. So you put the book out, it's phenomenally successful. And also there's a moment where you're like, I kind of want to make a list. I want to make a list. It needs to make a list. It's an exciting moment. It's also terrifying.
It is, and terrifying, because I'd put a lot of personal energy and effort into it. And it really was like, you have a child. I don't. My book is really like my only child. And I wanted it to do well, but I wanted it to add value. If I made a list or didn't make a list, I wanted it to help people grow their business. And if it made a list, fantastic. That helps for all kinds of reasons, and it's validation for the work. But I didn't write the book saying that was my ultimate goal. My goal was, how could I scale the fact that I can't travel around the world at this pace forever?
Right.
And how can I share some of these insights that I've garnered over time being a practitioner? And I was a little unique because I was a practitioner and an academic.
Yes.
Where many people who write business books have actually never done the job of being a CEO of a major company, driving transformation of 50,000 people on a global basis, or launching a product. They've never even launched a product.
Yes.
They study it and research it. I've actually done it.
Yes.
And researched it. So I had this unique perspective that I think is what really resonated, because it was, and by the way, you mentioned research. I did no primary research on my own. I just leveraged everybody else's research, because I'm like, why would I spend 10 years doing research? Like, there's already research out there. I don't need to reinvent it. I just need to tell the story of why it's important. So, I think the first one is I wanted it to be appreciated, I guess, right? And valuable. But I created a vision board before I wrote the book of sort of who I wanted to be my publisher, who I wanted to be my agent, who I wanted to be my publicist. The list I was interested in making was actually the Thinkers 50. I'm thrilled that the, book made lists, but for me, that was really what I was swinging for. Was I wanted to go play with the big boys, right? And big girls in that particular list. And so my vision board is one of those, I have it framed actually, that everything on that vision board I was able to accomplish. And I don't know if I shot low because I hit everything, or I just really was so focused on what I was trying to accomplish that I got lucky.
Yeah, first of all, I love that you have a vision board, because you are on social media very like professional, very buttoned down. You're on stage in a suit. I mean, you are like the epitome of, professional. And yet you have a vision board, which is kind of like this like hippy dippy new age. I love it. I love that you put together a vision board and that you call it that. And it's not some, like super bro,
it's a
like
vision
goal
board.
thing. It's a vision board. I just want you to know, in my mind, I've envisioned this like with like scrapbooking and like ribbons, and probably not, but like there's like fabric on it in my brain.
Yeah, no, it literally is about, it's about maybe about a yard by a yard, like kind of 3 feet by 3 feet. And it was literally like, what kind of book do I want to write? Who do I want to be my publisher and my publicist, and kind of lists of people that I admired and what books I read, and, things people have said about me in what I do. And I think that all made it onto the board to sort of give me the courage to give it a shot, because listen, as you said, like the average person sells a book 250 copies. And I have a major publisher who gave me a good size advance, and I had to pay it back. Right?
Yeah.
So, and then it sold and got translated in 9 languages. And so it's just sort of continuing. It just went paperback actually in the UK and the Commonwealth. And so, it's sort of still, moving along, which is great.
Okay. So the question, did I set my goals too low?
Yeah.
Let's go back to that, because that is, I think, at the very heart of Wonder Hell, where, everybody says like, if you can name it, you can tame it, like about these like big, hairy, scary goals, these audacious goals. And I think if you can name it, you can claim it, right? Like, I don't just sit around in life waiting for all I deserve. I want to get what I demand. I want to like create, like Oprah's got to talk to someone under the oak tree. Why not me one day, right? Like someone's got to be a guest on national television media. Why not you? Like, why not us? And I do always wonder about that. Am I setting my goals too low? Because every time I achieve something that I didn't even expect, then it's like, well, because like when you're at the bottom of a mountain range and you look at the top of the mountain, you're like, I want to go there. But then like halfway up the mountain, what do you see? You see the other ranges beyond it that are taller. And then you're like, oh shoot, now I've got to like husband my resources and my water and my fuel, because I want to keep going. So when you have that, like, did I set my goals too low? What's the thought process that goes through your mind at that moment?
Well, I knew that I had sort of one.
Thinkers 50 is pretty high. Like that's a pretty high goal.
It's a pretty high goal.
Yeah.
And I would say that I'm probably my own worst critic when it comes to stuff like that. Like, oh, okay. So I set ones I knew I would achieve. Like, okay, we've got sort of the short term. I know I'm going to achieve them. I had a little bit of a stretch. And Thinkers 50 was really sort of one of Wall Street Journal bestseller. Thinkers 50 were sort of my stretch, like that would be really awesome if I did either of those two things. Bestseller list really wasn't, just happened to be Wall Street Journal. And then I really realized that there was a reason also, and I'd be interested to hear what you think too. But when you look at the top business books written, there's very few women.
Yes.
So part of it was, do I think I can even write a business book that people will want to read and sort of put me in a category that is predominantly men?
Mm-hmm.
And, do I think I got the deal because I was a woman? No. Do I think I never got a deal because I was a woman? No. Like that, I don't, that is not maybe I'm naive, but that is not what my reality of how I feel. So I'd say that the swing at the fence was like, what's the worst that can happen? I don't make the list and I don't make the list.
Mm-hmm.
That's the worst that could happen. I would still go to work every day. I would still do keynotes. I would still do my podcast, and then I'd be like, okay, how can I, what do I need to do to make that happen? So I think that while I say maybe I made it too low, that's almost kind of a way of me not giving myself credit for the fact that I did all the hard work and it happened, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. But those two of bestseller list and the Thinkers 50, those were stretch goals for sure for me.
So now that you're sitting at the Wall Street Journal and the Thinkers 50 list, what's the view you see from there that you're like, all right, well, the next book, or, what's the next thing now where you're like, I want more, right? Like the first time I gave a talk, my TEDx was the very first talk I ever gave in my life. And I was completely terrified. And I walked out on stage and I took a deep breath and I looked up at the 3 mezzanines of people and I was like, and my sister who flew in from Texas was like, I thought you were going to pass out in that moment. I was like, I thought I was going to pass out in that moment too. But I took a deep breath and then I started. And as soon as I started, I said something funny and somebody stage right laughed. And then I said something poignant and somebody in stage left went, yes. And I was like, oh, I want more. So it's like you have that moment where suddenly you see the possibility. Like you're sitting there at the Wall Street Journal and Thinkers 50. What's the view look like from that next mountaintop?
I would answer this very differently, February 2020 to February 2021.
Okay. Let's have both. I want both.
Because February 2020, I had 70 keynotes booked around the world.
Yes.
I had, you know what I'm saying? And so I was like, the book is continuing, this is what I've worked so hard for, the pace, the interest, the opportunity was continuing to come. I was in Sydney the sort of second week of February until the second week of March. Well, I was in Australia and New Zealand. And I worked for Salesforce and we had our world tour event in Sydney on like March 5th. I was in region and it canceled and went to virtual. And I was like, okay, cause I was only not really paying attention, right? Cause I was international already.
You're like, shit's getting weird.
It's getting weird, right? Yeah. And so we just completely flipped the event, and we still had the convention center. We had everybody was in town already because we were going to do it live, and so we basically set up like we were doing live, but no one was in the audience, and so it was very strange. I got in like 2 days before the lockdown happened, and then I went into this massive reshift of like, okay, what am I doing? Like, my identity, my work, my value was so tied to, 100 keynotes and the book and speaking and advising face-to-face, that I very quickly was like, I have to figure out how do I transition to virtual, right? And so now I'm standing in my garage, which is now a full functioning production studio and work area. And, because I couldn't do it in my house. It just wasn't working. And thankfully I had the space to use. But so now I would answer it differently. Now I say, okay, I was really in the mode of, it was time for me to write another book. And now I'm like, is that what I want to do? Right? Or is it, how do I start to stretch myself and put out new and different kinds of content and participate in new things and add value in different ways? And so it's kind of been this reskinning of what does it mean for me to take growth IQ even further? What does that look like when I'm not on stage speaking physically, right? And then if I wanted to write another book, is this the time to do it? Because 18 months from now or 2 years from now when it publishes, hopefully, right, we're all back to some sense of business travel and events being on stage. But what if the events don't come back the way they were? What if it is this hybrid where it's a small audience and then everybody else is virtual? What if it's between virtual and in person over time? Like that has implications to how I would answer that. Like what's next, right? Because you're trying to solve for what's the best way to connect with people. And you're taking a gamble if in 18 or 24 months, we're back to doing that. So I would answer it 2 different ways. A year ago, I would have said, yep, I'm ready to write another book. I was already having the conversations, framing up what it was going to be, and then it was like, oh, still grounded, still grounded, still grounded. And for us, we've been told like we may be grounded to July or August, just from a Salesforce perspective, which has implications to my being able to travel. So, right now it's how do I just keep putting out content that people enjoy, doing things like this with you, and then thinking about, do I really want to write another book?
Yeah, I feel all of that so deeply. When March and April and all I was doing was like responding to client emails about like, how do we take this event? Do we go virtual? Do we delay it? Do we
Yep.
postpone it? Do we cancel it? What do we do? And how I was setting up my virtual studio and everything. And I did have that same crisis of identity, a little bit of like, who am I professionally if I'm not a speaker on stage? That's what I do. I'm a speaker. And then I had this realization that I'm not a speaker. I'm a thinker who speaks. I'm a writer who speaks. And just because being on a stage was how speaking was always done doesn't mean that that's the only way it can be done. I mean, I just sort of had this, my book is all about, as you know, all about how you need to redefine this for yourself and not the way everyone else does it. So meta moment, I needed to redefine speaking for myself. And I came to the realization that I am somebody who thinks about ideas and solves certain problems. So what is the idea that I have to solve the problem at hand? What is the solution that I can personally bring to it that problem needs? And then what's the best medium through which to do it? And that medium is me here in my home office, you in your garage. It's the way we do it right now. But there's nothing to say that this is going to be forever. There's also nothing to say that this isn't going to be part of what it's going to be like forever. And so I started 2020 with the idea that I was going to write the next book also. I was going to travel around. I was going to do these interviews face to face. I was going to sell them in a tranche to like Netflix or Hulu or something. And then from that, write the book about the stories that came out. It was going to be Wonder Hell, right? What happens on the edge of success? And of course, then that didn't happen. So I kind of put that, to the side for a while and tried to, recreate the whole speaking business and figure out a way to do it. And as things rolled on, I was like, you know what, I might as well start working on it. But everyone I know who put out a book this past year, I mean, it was like crickets. I mean, there was just, if your book wasn't about the presidential election or managing in a crisis or literally coronavirus, like the top books in 2020, the top selling books in 2020 were all published in 2019. There was just no attention. So, to write the next book that's going to be an evergreen book about leadership and growth and innovation, I feel like there's no rush to it, especially when, I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of time this year getting better and getting crisper about the things that I want to talk about now, because I've been forced to talk about them in a much different, much different modality.
Yeah, well, I'd say that for me, I'm like you. My identity was sort of storytelling in that sort of forum. But I would tell you that my research was while I was traveling, like those hall room conversations or backstage conversations, or the people that you meet, or the examples you hear from other speakers, or something someone says to you that triggers you to think differently about something. And my sort of decompression thinking time was my fly time.
Yes.
And I actually wrote my book in an airplane in lounges. And so part of my problem is, how do I continue that learning journey I so enjoy, disconnected physically from people? Because socially we can do Zoom calls or whatever. And I can do more of them. Like, I was saying in 2019, I did 100. 2020, I did 187. Like, right? I could do many more because this is my third today kind of a thing, And so you just change your shirt, new day, I'm ready, right? And go to town and do whatever you're going to do. But so I'd say that identity for me is very much, I go in and out of missing people, missing the rhythm I had, the interaction, the human connection. Like, I'm very much an extrovert. I really miss that. And so that for me has also been, that for me is something that every day I have to wake up and go, this is the reality we're all in. And so put on your big girl pants, and go out there and find a way to learn and find a way to connect and find a way to give back. And so that's been how I've entered this year.
It's hard to be insatiably curious we're endlessly exhausted, right? I mean,
Yes.
you are somebody who's I am an introvert, and I still love the green room and the hallway, and then the time in between where I get to take notes and I get to write. I also wrote my book on airplanes, and what I said to my husband was, it's not that I don't love you. I just don't want to. I want to be alone. I miss being alone. I haven't been alone in a year. This weekend marks a year since I've been in an airplane. And I was like, and he looked at me and he was like, he's like, I love having you here, but I'm looking forward to you coming home again. So
Right.
it's just,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'd say that, so, it's also a time where you have to really hone in on your craft,
Yes.
because, when I started speaking, I was not very good. I was good in my head, but I was definitely not very good. I
wasn't even good in my head.
I remember it so well. It was 2006, and I was in Houston, and I was giving a presentation at a Microsoft conference, and there was maybe like 500 people in the room. At the time, I was a Gartner analyst. And so I stand up there, I have my folder, and I'm behind the podium, and the mic's like this, and I'm very serious, and I'm going to give my presentation.
And did you have slides filled with words? Tons and tons and tons of words?
Completely against Guy Kawasaki's, 3 rules.
Yep.
Yes.
Let me read you. Let me read you my slide. Okay.
I read. And I'm like looking at notes, and I'm not moving, and I'm, well, they videotaped
It's so not you. It's so not the you I know today.
Right. And so they videotaped it.
Oh.
So I watched it and I was like,
oh, painful.
That was really bad.
Yeah.
So I became sort of a student of the craft. So a couple things I did, which I think you will love, Laura, considering what you did in your last life, is I would watch people who were orators and really amazing storytellers. So you get an Oprah Winfrey or a Barack Obama or, whomever that you feel is a good storyteller that resonates with you. And I did 2 things. One, I would watch them and not listen.
Oh.
So I would see, are they fussy? Do they, so I'm not listening, right? But I'm watching the pace, the hands in their pocket, hands on their hip, playing with their hair. Like, what are they doing? Then I listened and I didn't watch. So then it was the pace of speech, the inflection in their voice when they really wanted to make a point.
Yes.
And so I was listening and learning and watching in the medium of the watch, no sound, the listen, the no sight. And I worked really hard at my craft. Like, how do I get better and better? How do I try to pause in what I'm saying and pull them in? Like the first time you do it, it's awkward and it doesn't feel right, right?
There is nothing louder than the deafening silence of 2,500 people waiting for you to take your next, to make your next point. It is horrifying.
Okay. So, 2006, 2015, Microsoft event, right? 500 people, 17,000 live in the Verizon Center in DC. Same conference. Now I've been doing it for 10 years. It was 1 session, 2 sessions, then it became like 8, and then become the, best performing session that they gave from an outside speaker. Then I land on main stage, 17,000 people in the round, cameras floating around, deafening silence is painful in 17,000. Like if no one laughs, it's really bad. So this was a 20-minute speech. The first 6 or 7 minutes, I had to hit very specific points. The ending 14 minutes was sort of my normal talk track because I was sort of setting up. It was Satya Nadella's very first public so I had to set him up and, I had to do some things. So I gave the video to, you may know Nancy Duarte, who's sort of the master. Okay. So I sent it to Nancy and I said, I just want you to watch this keynote, right? It's been this culmination of me going on this journey of trying to get better. She goes, I liked it, but the first 6 minutes were a little rough. The backside of it, you showed up, right? So it really, once someone tried to overscript me or whatever, I don't do so well if I'm able to do this, right? So my point here of telling the story is whatever your superpower may be, you have to become a student of that profession, whatever it is. And you're going to suck a couple of times, if not a lot of times. And you may have a good day. And then the next day it might be completely a train wreck. but you have to be committed to, what did I learn this time?
Yes.
And so as I learned what worked, what landed, and then you also have to learn culturally, certain things we say as Americans don't translate, how you say it, the speed in which you talk, if in fact they're being translated. Like, there's all these little things that go into whether there's 10 people or 10,000, you can make more money, you can't make more time. So if someone walks out of your session and feels like they've wasted your time, you have totally failed.
That's a crime.
And so not everyone is going to go like, my God, that's the best thing I ever heard, or I learned so much. They might say, well, it was okay, I enjoyed it, right? Might not go see her again, but at least they don't feel like that was a total waste of time. Now, has that happened? Sure, I'm sure it has. But, I would just say that during this time, that communication is this way. Now, how do I tell a story across a camera to, thousands of people who I don't see? I don't get to move. You only see me from the waist up. I lose 50% of my storytelling ability, right? And so it's very different. So, to your point, after a presentation, you go backstage, you're exhausted because you've just given everything you have. So, I would just say that whatever that fear might be, public speaking, just start speaking. If your writing is it, start blogging. Like, it doesn't matter if no one reads it, you're going to get better and better and better and better and better. So that's what I'd say about that.
For sure. Absolutely. It's funny that you say that. When I get off stage, my Whoop band actually registers it as a workout. It's like, congratulations, you've just completed a workout. It's like, because you do leave everything out there. I actually watch a lot of stand-up comedy to help me with it. And I do that because it's funny. But also, if you're going to keep the audience's entire attention when it's just you on stage with like a stool and a microphone, like, there's great storytelling, there's callbacks, there's pauses. I mean, there's facial expressions, there's having that dialogue with the audience, even though they don't say their part. And there's so much that I learned from just becoming a student of that. But I your story about the 6 minutes and then the 14 minutes, I feel that so deeply in my heart. I'm sure Scott Stratton, another speaker friend of ours, and I sent him the video of the talk that I did at the Art of, where I shared the stage with you. And I had been given some speaker training for it, which had me go out on stage and do this thing where I'm like, I'm going to teach you the secret of success. Over here, you guys write this down. Over there, you write these things down. Are you feeling successful? No, because I made it up. And it's like this weird thing that I do for the first few minutes. And then I tell the story about the first day of school where I suddenly realized that I was this massive failure, and I had to second guess every decision I ever made as a parent and every sacrifice I ever chose not to make as a working parent. And it's this very vulnerable, very me story. And I sent him this video, and he calls me up and he's like, okay, I watched your video. He's like, I don't know who the hell you were for those first 4 minutes, but I hated you. He's like, and I love you. He's like, but I hated you. Like, I don't know who you were. He goes, and then you told the story about your kids. And I was like, that's the LGO I know and love. He's like, you could just start there. And I'm like, so I should just walk out on stage and be like, my kids are assholes. And he's like, yes. So it's become basically, I don't say that, but it's become known as a joke in my house. That's like the my kids are asshole story. But what you said about what is your magic? What is your magic on stage? What is the thing that you know so well? And how can you be that person sooner? And how do you figure out how to take that version of yourself and apply it to the other things? But I think that's just reps. That's just practice. And, it's total practice. And, one of the bits of advice I got was, Laura, you're funny. And I was like, I'm what? I'm funny? Like, I know I'm funny, like in conversation, but like funny on stage? Like, am I allowed to be funny? I thought I had to stand at the lectern and give the serious talk to be taken seriously, especially as a woman, right? Like, I thought I had to be taken seriously. And this guy was like, no, you're funny. Like, go be funny. He's like, how would you tell the party if you were at a cocktail? Or how would you tell the story if you were at a cocktail party? And I was like, oh, I would just tell it like this. And I did it. And he's like, go do that. And I was like, I can do that. I'm allowed to do that. And he's like, please, for the love of God, please do that. Like, it's just so much more entertaining.
Yeah, and the audience knows it. Like, they know if you're not being authentic,
They can smell it.
And I think that, you really have to, going back to sort of the superpower, it was actually Nancy Duarte again. We were having this conversation. She goes, well, how do you think people perceive you? Mm-hmm. It's a really great question. So what I started doing, this is 2006 to 2012, is at the end of my presentations, people would want the presentation.
Yes.
So I said, here's the trade. Here's my email. Email me feedback on my presentation.
That was going to be my next question was, do you read the comments? How did you get better? So I'm so glad we're going here.
And then I would send them the deck. And I said, and while I appreciate that you said that, like, you know, you like my suit or my shirt or whatever, like it has to be about the substance of the presentation. Like you got to give me feedback, right? And that really helped me hone my stories. And people would say, you know, you said this, we did that. The next time I gave the presentation, I said, and then this company, da, 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 da. And so I had real examples of
so smart.
So it was, what would end up happening is people would say, like, it was almost like you were sitting in our leadership meeting. That's exactly how do you stay so close to the pulse? And it was because I was getting hundreds a week of real-time feedback. So that helped me to say that story fell flat. That slide doesn't resonate. This, while people really like this, let me expand that topic. And so I was using that as my own little advisory board, if you will, in that sort of quid pro quo of, you want the deck? I want feedback. And then Sally Hogshead, I don't know if you know who she is, like, okay, so I'm a maestro. So what I did was I took all those emails and I started looking for the words of what people use to describe me. So powerful, inspirational, like, you know, witty, whatever it was. And then I took it and completely rewrote my LinkedIn profile and my, you know what I mean? Like, this is how people perceive me, which is her advice. You know, this isn't a me thing, right? But I did the whole exercise. And so once I knew I was a maestro, and then I knew what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were, my non-strengths, I started doubling down. So this goes back to what, you know, it is a day-to-day, what can I learn? What can I do? What can I do different? What can I get uncomfortable with? How do I reinvent myself? And we are in this master global experiment of reinvention, personally and professionally, every single day. So that's what inspires me to keep doing it, because companies still have to grow. And the book is about growth. And even though it's 2 years old, it's almost more relevant today than it was 2 years ago, because everybody is trying to figure out what do we need to be doing. So, you know, that's kind of a little bit of my process and why I'm so passionate about what I get to do.
So one of the things that you talk about, it's one of the underlined phrases in the very chapter 1, or maybe even in the intro, is that growth and comfort never coexist. And yeah, it is. And that really, honestly, like, that is the very center of Wonder Hell. Like, there is this moment where you're like, I can either keep doing what I'm doing and just ignore that possibility, that possible me that I see out there, or I could take the weight of this burden of my own potential that I now am struggling with, that I now have no choice but to know exists out there. So as you're looking at the companies that you studied and the companies for whom you work, do you see stories that mirror your own growth, where there's been these moments where, you know, you have to read the comments, you have to ask for the feedback, you have to get uncomfortable, you have to watch the video of you, you know, in some ways where, like, companies have to do the same thing. Leaders that you work with have to do the same thing. So they have to get in this place of being uncomfortable in order to have that growth.
Absolutely. So I think leaders are at a crossroads right now. You have a choice to go back to the status quo, or you have a choice to reimagine what's possible. And those two things require you to make a decision. And so I often use Undercover Boss, and I use it in the book as an example of how, you know, the first 5 or 6 minutes of Undercover Boss, they spend sort of, you know, disguising the leader so that they can go out into, you know, their organization and no one will recognize them. I think it's a complete waste of 6 minutes of expensive television, because no one would recognize them anyway, because they never leave their office. Because the fact that a leader would not know that this was going on in their company means, are you just not paying attention?
Or do you not care?
I think it's just they're not paying attention,
right?
Not paying attention. Or they're guarded, where people don't want to give the leader the bad news. And so they're insulated from the reality, which forces a leader to get out and ask those questions and get uncomfortable. So if you're listening to this and you're looking for that kind of feedback, you actually have to become a master asker. You have to ask better questions so you can get better insights. And even if it's things you don't like, it's super important for you to go out there and ask those questions. And so, you know, I was open to the comments, and look, like, I read the comments on the book online. You know, I've gotten 1 star, I've gotten 5 stars, and the 1 star is like, oh, nothing new. And I'm like, that was on purpose. Right. And neither did I say there was, right. You know, or, you know, some people, like, didn't like the format, didn't like the work I'd put into it from just the feel of the book. So, I mean, I think that it's I'm not a celebrity in that way, where if I were, I don't know, if I were Angelina Jolie and I was getting just beat up by, every sort of public venue there, that might be a different story. That's not who I am. So I don't have to, sort of push off a lot of negativity. But when I get it, I have to really take off my personal hat to not get my feelings hurt and just be like, okay, what are they really saying here? And how can I make it better the next time? Or maybe it was confusing and so I can clarify it, or I just need to not say it anymore because it's not landing right. And if people don't like it, then I just need to eliminate it instead of, yeah.
There was one joke that I made on stage every single time, and I thought it was the funniest joke ever. And it literally never got a laugh line. Like there's this moment where I'm like, well, who do we go to when we can't figure out what success should be and what's going to make us happy? And I'm like, well, we go there. And I put a picture of all the Kardashians on the stage. And I'm like, I mean, there's so many of them. One of them has to have the answer, right? There's Kim and there's Chris and there's Kendall and there's Kylie. And I mean, now, my God, there's even Kanye. I mean, if Yeezy doesn't know the answer, surely all hope is lost. And everyone's laughing about the Kardashians all. And then as soon as I say Kanye and Yeezy, it's like, nothing. And I thought it was hilarious, right? Like she married a guy with the name K and Yeezy and nothing. And I must have used that joke like a dozen times until finally I was like, all right, guess I'm going to kill that darling. So I'm going to kill it. But it's hard. So this is my last area to question is, so you talked about asking better. And I think asking better means making sure that you're asking in a way where the people who are giving you feedback feel safe. They feel like you really want it. They feel like it's actually going to be useful. It's not going to be a waste of their time to give it. And also it's about picking your critics and who are you actually going to listen to? So I'm sort of interested in this idea of letting anybody in the audience give you feedback, right? And how do you determine which of that feedback you take and which you let pass by? Because not everybody in that audience is going to be your people, right? They're not all, like some of them are going to be giving you feedback based on how they feel, not on how you performed. So when you're in those wonder hell moments and you're like, I could do more, I'm made for more, I could get better, I want to get better, I'm hungry to get better. How do you protect yourself to get the right kind of feedback that's going to be constructive? And also, how do you choose those critics?
Yep. Great question. Because I'd say if you're going to start asking questions, you have to be open to listen to what is said.
Yeah.
Right. So you ask, you're listening. You're not listening to answer back or defend yourself. You're literally listening to listen.
Right.
And the answer to whatever they've said back may be nothing. It may be, let me take that and think about that. And if you really ask somebody and they give you feedback and you take that opportunity to say, I'm going to step away for a second and I'm going to figure out my answer. You have to come back and say, you know what? I thought long and hard about what you said. And my initial instinct was my feelings were hurt, but then I really understood the intention. Look, you would never say something and then say what you got out of it. Because now what you've done is you said, you listened to what they said, you were open to hear what it is, and you're even might be open to, make a change. But you could also come back and say, I'm not going to do that. So, like going back to the book or going back to Keynote where they say, oh, you really should do this. You should get on stage and say 3 or 4 things and then start your presentation. But it just falls flat. And so you end up saying, you know what, I tried it. I'm not going to do it. Whatever. Right. Like it isn't always advice you have to take and use. But there may be some glimmer in there that if you can push away your defense mechanism of constructive feedback, that you will get better because of it. Now, I have an inner tribe that I ask those questions to, and then there's sort of the general that will give you feedback for stage, or for a presentation or for your book, whatever it might be. And so, the inner tribe, I trust to like call no BS with me. They will say, I wouldn't do that. It's just not good. It's not a good look. Like I'd pass on it.
Yes.
And then you have some that go, something else. And so, you got to sort of pick your battles. And so asking better questions and listening is really a skill that I've had to work on, where I ask a question and then I'm really present for the answer instead of letting my brain start going to trying to answer what they're then saying. So I'd say trust your inner circle, figure out who they are, find champions for you and your career. And then even find yourself some naysayers, the ones that are just always going to find the bad in what you do, or always going to have a negative feedback, because it's important to balance. It can't be all rainbow butterflies and unicorns, because then you're never willing to get uncomfortable. You've got to get the, the yin and the yang, if you will, of the feedback.
Yeah. How often do you spend your time with like 9 toes over the edge of incompetence, where you're like, I'm really excited, this is where I'm going next, and I can't wait for the thing? Or are you 2020, I think a lot of us spend a lot of time with 9 toes at the edge of incompetence, but is that your preferred place to be, where you're experimenting and you're growing and you're learning? Or do you like being in a place where you're sort of mostly mastery and you're working around the edges?
So it's a great question, because I would say that I learned about 5 years ago. I was going to write the book. I was leaving Gartner, and I was deciding. I had made a decision. I was going to leave. Where was I going to go? I can't tell you how many people said, Tiffani, hang your own shingle, start your own consulting business. You're speaking a lot. And I realized over a bottle or two of wine with my friend Naomi Simpson, who's a shark on Shark Tank Australia. And so we were in Sydney and we were having dinner and we were having this conversation. Obviously, she's a super entrepreneur.
Right.
She's
like push, push, push.
Yeah.
Maybe.
She's Ernst & Young, sort of an entrepreneur of the year. She's, a top influencer on LinkedIn. She's got like 6 million followers on LinkedIn. I mean, like, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we're having this conversation, and from that dinner and from those bottles of wine, I realized I am not an entrepreneur. Like, it's just not in my risk quotient. And it was actually freeing for me, because I felt this angst, like, why can't I just do it? Why can't I just take the leap? Why can't I just work for myself? Why can't I just do this? And in retrospect, thankfully, I didn't in 2020, because, the world came to a halt. Right. But ultimately, once I realized that was not, like, I couldn't take the jump. I might have been on the cliff, but I couldn't take the jump for entrepreneurship. And I backed up and I went, great, now I'm all in on what I'm doing. How can I be an entrepreneur in a massive company like Salesforce and do what I get to do? And I'm blessed I have this dream job to kind of continue to stretch. But that was freeing for me. So now my toes are on the cliff for very different things, right? It's not I work for myself, or I'm going to go hang my shingle. Like, I've decided at that point in my life that wasn't a risk I wanted to take. And so, I think there's a lot to be said with, if everything's a risk, then you really have to fall in love with failure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I'm very much an entrepreneur in my soul. And it was a real learning moment when a business coach said to me, just because the people who work in this entrepreneurial endeavor like that you're an entrepreneur doesn't make them entrepreneurs. Like, you're still the one who holds some of the risk. And just understanding the difference between being entrepreneurial and being an entrepreneur was like a watershed for me. So I love that. Tiffani, I could talk to you all day. I will tell you, my favorite texts are the texts that you send me from around Beverly Hills of ridiculous yellow cars, my limitless yellow. They are so great. And I want to respect the time.
The first one was a yellow Lamborghini SUV. I was in Sydney.
Yes. I get like postcards from all over, the limitless postcards from all over the world from Tiffani Bova. It is the greatest gift ever. This is the joy of being in a green room, is that you get to, like, yeah, we were at that event with Malala and Robin Roberts, right. But Tiffani Bova sends me yellow from all over the world. That's
what I'm here for.
That's amazing. I love it. This is terrific. I have on the scroll on the bottom where people can find you, but we're gonna strip this and put it on a podcast to tell the fine people who are looking for you where they can pick up a copy of the incredible book Growth IQ and where they can find you.
So I'm pretty active on social. I try to be anyway. So I'm on, Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and recently on Clubhouse. I listened to Laura's stuff on Clubhouse, so don't forget that. And then you can pick up my book pretty much anywhere. Like I said, 9 languages. We've got it in simple Chinese, Mandarin, Polish, Portuguese, Spanish, Vietnamese, Thai.
Amazing.
Queen's English, American. So, pick it up wherever you can, online or at bookstores.
Thank you so much. It has been great to talk to you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for having me.